I thought I was making the right choice. I was wrong. At that moment, everything seemed under control. I didn't feel fear, I didn't feel urgency, I didn't sense any clear warning signs. On the contrary, the decision felt logical, almost obvious. I believed I was being mature, rational, and conscious. Looking back now, I realize it was exactly that excessive confidence that blinded me. I confused calm with safety and silence with the absence of risk. The consequences didn't appear immediately. Life went on normally for a while, and that reinforced the idea that I had chosen well. Days passed without major changes, and I started to relax. Whenever a small discomfort appeared, I ignored it, telling myself it was normal, that it was part of any important decision. I didn't want to question something I had already decided. The problem is that some decisions don't charge their price right away. They accumulate silently, gaining strength while we move forward without looking back. When I finally realized the real impact of that choice, it was no longer something small or reversible. That's when I understood that not seeing consequences coming doesn't mean they aren't forming. I didn't immediately notice that the decision was changing me from the inside. At first, everything seemed normal, but something subtle began to happen. My way of thinking became more defensive. I started justifying attitudes that would have bothered me before. I began ignoring internal signals that had always worked as warnings. The most dangerous part wasn't the mistake itself, but the way I started to normalize it. Over time, I realized the mind has an impressive ability to protect the ego. Whenever discomfort arose, I found a logical explanation to keep going. I told myself I was overreacting, that everyone goes through this, that it was just a phase. Psychology studies call this rationalization, when the brain creates justifications to avoid confronting a possible wrong choice. At the time, I didn't know that. Today, looking back, it's clear how hard I was trying to maintain the illusion of control. The turning point didn't happen all at once. It was a sequence of small losses: confidence, emotional clarity, connection with important people. Nothing exploded suddenly. Everything wore down little by little. That made it even harder to see that the problem wasn't external, but rooted in the decision I had made and kept sustaining. The more time passed, the more trapped I felt by the need to prove I was right. Admitting the mistake felt worse than dealing with the consequences. Research on decision-making shows that human beings tend to stick with bad choices once they've invested time, energy, or emotion in them. This is known as the sunk cost effect. I was living exactly that. Instead of evaluating reality as it was, I evaluated it based on how much I had already lost, and that led me to deepen the impact of that initial decision even further. There was a specific moment when it could no longer be ignored. A simple conversation revealed everything I had been avoiding. What seemed obvious to someone else was a shock to me. I realized I wasn't just dealing with external consequences, but with a deep internal disconnection. I no longer recognized my own reactions. That was the moment when the phrase, "I thought I was making the right choice," stopped being just a thought and became a painful realization. From that point on, something changed, not because the situation was resolved, but because the denial fell away. For the first time, I faced the decision without justifications, without trying to make it acceptable, just as it truly was. And that confrontation brought an uncomfortable but liberating clarity. I understood that decisions don't only define outcomes, they shape identity. Every repeated choice reinforces who we become. This story matters because it reveals something we rarely talk about. It's not the big impulsive decisions that destroy us, but the decisions sustained in silence, the ones that seem small, rational, and harmless at first, but slowly erode who we are.
I learned that late awareness is still awareness, and that recognizing consequences is the first step to interrupting a cycle before it becomes irreversible. After denial fell away, I had to face something even harder than admitting the mistake, understanding why I had made that choice in the first place. It wasn't enough to recognize the consequences. I had to return to the starting point and observe my emotional state at that moment. I realized the decision wasn't born from clarity, but from exhaustion. I was tired of thinking, feeling, and dealing with uncertainty. Choosing felt like a way to end the internal conflict, even temporarily. I began to understand that many of the most dangerous decisions aren't made impulsively, but out of emotional exhaustion. When we're tired, our priority stops being what's right and becomes what relieves us. That's exactly what I did. I chose the path that seemed easier at the time, not because it was better, but because it required less immediate confrontation.
Over time, it became clear that this choice created a pattern. Other decisions started following the same logic. Whenever something required confrontation, patience, or waiting, I felt an automatic resistance. I wanted to resolve it quickly, close the matter, move on. The problem is that not everything can be resolved quickly without cost. Some things require maturity, presence, and a willingness to move through discomfort. I wasn't prepared for that then, and I paid the price. One of the hardest lessons was realizing that the consequences didn't come only from what I did, but from what I failed to do afterward. There were opportunities to correct course, to stop, to reconsider, to go back, but I didn't. Not out of arrogance, but out of fear of admitting to myself that I was wrong. Each day of postponement deepened the situation, and the deeper I went, the harder it seemed to get out. Through this process, I understood something essential. Taking responsibility isn't punishing yourself, it's regaining control. While I blamed circumstances, other people, or time, I felt trapped. When I finally accepted that the choice had been mine, something shifted. Not because the pain disappeared, but because I stopped being a prisoner to it. I began to see options where before I saw only consequences. I also learned that difficult decisions don't ask for perfection, they ask for honesty. I spent a long time trying to appear strong, rational, and secure, when in reality I was confused and insecure. If I had been honest with myself from the beginning, maybe I would have chosen differently, or at the very least I would have realized sooner that something needed to change. Today, looking back, I understand that decision was a breaking point, not because it destroyed everything, but because it exposed everything. It exposed my emotional limits, my vulnerabilities, my automatic patterns. And as painful as that was, it became a real opportunity for growth. I learned that decisions don't only define external paths, they build the relationship we have with ourselves. After that experience, I never chose the same way again. I learned to pause, to listen to discomfort instead of running from it, to question my own motives. The consequences I didn't see coming taught me something no easy decision ever could. After everything that happened, it became clear that the greatest impact of that decision wasn't just the visible consequences, but the internal change it caused. I began to see my choices differently. Before, I believed deciding was about being right or wrong. Today, I understand that deciding is, above all, about taking responsibility for the path you choose to walk. There is no neutral choice. Every decision builds something or demands something, even when we don't notice it at first. What marked me most was realizing how much I underestimated the power of small choices sustained over time. I didn't lose everything at once, I lost it gradually. A boundary I didn't set, a discomfort I ignored, an internal signal I silenced. When I realized it, it was no longer just about that initial decision, but about who I had become while sustaining it. This experience taught me that delayed awareness is still awareness, but it always comes at a higher cost.
If I could go back, I wouldn't just change the decision, but the way I listened to myself. Today, I respect initial discomfort much more because I learned it almost always carries information. Ignoring it is what put me in that situation. Facing it is what began to take me out. If you're watching this video and feel that something in your life isn't aligned, maybe it's not the moment to look for external answers, but to observe your recent choices. What you're tolerating today may be exactly what will demand a price tomorrow. Sometimes we don't see consequences because we're too busy trying to justify our decisions. This story isn't about guilt, it's about awareness. It's not about fear, it's about maturity. The consequences I didn't see coming taught me to choose with more presence, more honesty, and less haste. And that lesson, as hard as it was, completely changed the way I live today. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel. Here, every video is an invitation to reflect on choices, responsibility, and real growth. Leave a comment sharing whether you've lived something similar or if you're facing an important decision right now. Like the video and share it with someone who might need to hear this today. Sometimes the right story at the right moment can prevent a future consequence.